Good morning, everyone. It's Tuesday of Passion Week, the last week of the life of Jesus Christ before he dies on the cross on Friday and he resurrects on Sunday. Today we're going to be covering three chapters, Matthew 23, 24, and 25. I'm going to focus just on chapter 23, verses 3 through 5, help you understand what's happening, and then you can go ahead and read devotionally the rest of the chapters that I do not include in this devotional on Tuesday morning. Matthew 23, verses 3 through 5. Jesus is speaking to the crowds. He's speaking to his disciples. He has just dismissed those that are trying to trip him up with trick questions. And so he turns to the crowd, he turns to the disciples, and he says, therefore do whatever they tell you. They being the religious leaders. So he turns and he says, do whatever they tell you and observe it. They are leading you into the law of Moses. The religious leaders, don't forget, they're really upset because yesterday, Monday, they saw Jesus come in and he cleared out the temple. He took the money changing tables and he flipped it over and he said, you've made my father's house of prayer into a den of thieves, and it's cost the religious leaders their influence. It has cost them their money and their profit from selling the sacrifices for more than they should in the exchange of money. So religious leaders are already upset yesterday for what Jesus did, and now Jesus is going back after them today. So he turns, he says, therefore do whatever they tell you. So he is giving respect to the religious leaders, and he says, observe it, but don't do what they do. So he says, listen to what they say. They're leading you and telling you to do right. They're telling you to follow God's law, the law of Moses found in the Old Testament. They're telling you to observe that, do that, but don't follow their life. So listen to what they are telling you, but don't watch their lives. Don't do what they do, because they don't practice what they teach. Different translations translate this in different ways, but really Jesus is calling them hypocrites. And a hypocrite is someone that says one thing and they do another. And that is what Jesus is looking at the religious leaders. And he's telling them, y'all are getting it right. You know what you're saying, but you're not following through and doing it with your life. We want to hear what you have to say, but we don't want to watch your lives, because what you're saying and what you're doing are two very different things. And then he goes on in verse 4, he says, they, being the religious leaders, they tie heavy loads that are hard to carry. They're telling you, and they're adding to the burden of things that they need to do and follow. They're taking it to the extreme. And he says, and they put them on the people's shoulders. So just imagine walking with extra burdens and extra weight. It's more work, it's more effort, and it causes more trouble in your own life. And Jesus is saying that's what the religious leaders are doing. The very people that are tasked to bring you into a relationship with Christ are the ones that are making it more difficult. And so he says they tie heavy loads that are hard to carry and they put them on the people's shoulders, but they aren't willing to lift a finger to move them. So what he's saying is they're telling them everything that they need to do, but then they're not offering help. They're not offering an opportunity to help people grow in their relationship with God. And that's the exact opposite of what religious leaders should be doing. They should be encouraging you, and they should be doing all they can to be able to help you grow in your relationship with God. Verse 5, and we're going to end there. Jesus says, they, being the religious leaders, they do everything to be seen by others. And so what happens here is the religious leaders, they only do things when the spotlight is on them. They're not doing things behind the scenes. They're not doing things to help people grow. They're just doing things to make themselves look better. And Jesus starts in chapter 23 in these first few verses, and he just begins to lay into the religious leaders. Throughout the chapter 23, he calls them blind guides. He calls them hypocrites. He calls them they're full of pride. He tells them that they pay money, but they forget compassion. He calls them a whitewashed tomb, which means that the tomb looks good on the outside. It looks very well kept, but inside there are dead man's bones in there. And he says, you all look good on the outside, but inside you are dead. And he calls them snakes. He calls them vipers all through chapter 23. And this is going to infuriate the religious leaders, and it's really going to make them mad because they've been called out in public by this quote prophet who is the Son of God, and this just makes them angry, and this is going to motivate them to get rid of him even more. That is what Jesus has done on Tuesday, Matthew 23, Matthew 24, and Matthew 25. I hope you have a great day. Take time to read these chapters and just think about and ponder and meditate on what Christ has done on Tuesday, 3 days before he is crucified.